The annoying. All right, hello everybody. Sorry for the lateness here, um, but anyway, today I guess I'm leading Shir, and we're going to talk about recha, the idea of I'll call it smell, something like that. But I don't even know if that's a good definition. But I just kind of want to present this case outside before we even like touch any of the sources, just like halachic instinct wise. If I have an oven and I have bread's probably a good example, right? I have a loaf of bread cooking in the oven, and let's pretend it's I don't know. I have a non-Jewish roommate. It's a communal oven, whatever it may be, and they cook some trefa or nevela in that oven. Like just instinctually, how do I feel about this bread and why? I just want to open that up for question.
I feel very uncomfortable about this bread. Regardless of like what we end up ending up on, there's something about the proximity. There's something about using the same cooking device that puts a bad smell in my nose.
Good. Anybody else? Anybody feel comfortable just instinctually with it? Interesting. Does the size of the oven matter, like to your I know everyone's read the sources, but like, does that make a difference?
Instinctually, no. Halachically, probably yes. But on the basis of pure instinct, I think like what I gathered, what Noam was saying is just something in your gut just it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. So, other than this, I didn't. I mean, Josh, you may know some of the best of this. I remember several years ago, Rachel and I were traveling in Europe, and they have all these like kashrut guides to Europe that you can, get because unlike the United States, where we're very blessed, where you can go to like a store anywhere and there's stuff with like an OU on it, right? You have to know like it's not so prevalent in Europe. And I remember reading stuff about bakery breads and when can you walk into it, which gets into also another thing about pat akum and all that. But even beyond that, like questions of what ovens these breads were baked in. And is it still the case that certain breads in bakeries are okay? Is that in Europe? Is that something that they still say or no?
Yeah, baguettes, okay.
Yes.
Always, and then southern Germany, you're scared of everything. They kind of smear lard on everything.
But not in the oven itself, or
on some breads.
On the bread itself.
On some bread.
It's an ingredient question as much as it's like what it's cooked with kind of question. So, yeah. But all right. So I just want to like bring up another thing that I'll put it out there, and I think maybe my instinct's right on this. I don't know. We'll see. But to me, at least, when you cook two things in an oven, it almost feels like cooking two things in the same pot, right? That in some ways the environment created by, and I'm not talking about zayah necessarily like steam, but like just even the reach feels like it's like a liquid medium that's just throwing flavor all over the place, right? That's and to me, I'm nervous about this, but I also understand that at the end of the day, it's a smell and it's maybe not actually tom, right? There are certain things that you can smell that you don't taste. And tom is a major factor we deal with. And at the end of the day too, I mean, we know not that this is done scientifically, but we know scientifically, right? It takes a lot fewer molecules to smell something than it does to taste something. That's just I mean, anybody, you don't have to need science for that. Or molecular theory. You just kind of know it. Less stuff, a little bit of stuff smells but doesn't taste, right? That's a general principle of the world. So, okay. Any responses to that before we move on to some actual texts? Okay, Tov. So I want to start. I'll share my screen. And I think everybody has the source sheet as well, if I'm not mistaken. Here we go. Still in there. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Okay, so we're going to start with a Mishnah in Masechet Trumot. Maybe I'm actually learning Zeraim right now, and Mishnah Zeraim, and it's amazing how much good stuff there is in there about like dietary rules and eating habits. that we wouldn't think about very often, especially if anybody ever wants to learn Masechet Tamai. I'm sure a lot of you have learned Masechet Tamai. Masechet Tamai is an amazing thing about like how do you eat with people who have different standards. But let's someone read. Maybe I'll start us out with Masechet Trumot. Trumot has the following case: Tanur sheisiku bekamon shel truma. So you have truma cumin, and you use that to light the oven, right? That's the source of fire potentially in the oven or of heat. Ve'afabo hapat, and you bake some bread in there. Muteret she'ein tam kamon ela reach kamon, right? And that you can eat that bread if presumably if you're a non-kohen or you're a kohen not in the right state to eat truma. Why? Because that's not the tam, that's the reach. Okay, that's we have some split here we see where reach is not the same thing as tam, and tam is something we care about, reach is not something we care about, at least in the case of truma. So any just responses to that, thoughts about that before we move on? Okay. All right, so someone pick up with the Yerushalmi for us. Josh, you're next on my screen, so I'm just gonna pick on you if that's okay. This is the Yerushalmi and Trumot.
אוקיי. אוקיי. מהו לצלות שני שיפודים, אחד של בשר שחוטה ואחד של בשר נבלה בתנור אחד? רב ירמיה אמר בשם רב, אסור, ושמואל אמר בשם לוי, מותר. פליגה,
So you lay out the positions for us here, right? This is going to deal directly with what you want to deal with. So yeah.
So they're asking what's the deal with if you have two shipudim of meat, one kosher and one not kosher.
Steak, I would say, or not steak like STA, like like the things, the metal things you use to, or the wood in the case of Korban Pesach.
Skewer.
What was that?
Skewers.
Skewers. There we go. That's the English word. Skewer. I like it. That's yeah. So.
I'm a vegetarian. I don't even know all this stuff.
Oh, you wrote vegetables on those things too. It's all good.
Yeah. So you have two of them, two skewers, one with kosher meat and one with nevela meat in the same oven. And you have two positions. Rav basically says asur and Shmuel says mutar.
Well, Shmuel says, right, it's really interesting. It's
in the same Levi.
And Levi, right? And Rav and Levi are going to continue to be the debate. We'll see in the Bavel version of it as well, right? About mutar versus asur. Okay. All right, keep going.
Pliga מתניתין על רב, אין צולין שני פסחים בתנור אחד, מפני התערובת. לא אמרו אלא מפני תערובת, שלא מפני תערובת, לא.
Great.
שלא מפני תערובת, לא. So we have a Mishnah that contradicts with Rav, which says, you don't roast two psachim offerings in one oven because of the mixture.
Yeah. What does he mean by mixture, by the way, here?
Mixing.
That's not it. Yeah.
What was that?
I thought is it the juices?
No. Well, but potentially. But what's the issue with
Swapping
mixing?
the body?
Because
Exactly. Yeah. So. Right, I have a lot of you were jumping in for swapping them. Right, once you're committed to a Korban Pesach, you're like designated to it. You can't go eat somebody else's Korban Pesach, right? That's a problem there. And so what they mean by mixing is like you mix them up, or they may be,
I mean, it doesn't that come into debate in the
what?
in the Gemara, like what exactly the Talmud means? But the issue is that like it might be mixing flavors, I think, but the issue is that your family is supposed to get your Korban Pesach and not taste the other person's on it.
Exactly. So you're right. So there's two ways I think you could read this Yerushalmi. One is, at least up until this point, is that this is a question of, you can't put them together because I may just take the wrong Korban Pesach. Forget flavors, forget taste, forget reach, right? I just may take the wrong one. And we'll see that come up. Or it could be possibly because you're mixing the flavors, or the reach is a mix of flavors of the two korbanot. On the other hand, it's hard to end the Yerushalmi with that, right? When it says, right, lo. right?
I mean, also in the Psachim one, I think it ends up becoming pretty explicit, like the way that they drive it with like the Gediut Taleh thing. That it's like,
Exactly.
why would that be significant?
Mhm.
It was just about flavor.
Exactly. Yeah. When it becomes if I get my species right, I always mix this up: a sheep versus a goat, right? Where you wouldn't, you know, that. Well, you say that it's not about flavor, that it is about flavor. You think from that, Lexi?
As in, it's not. It's about why. So it wouldn't be like a filu if
Yeah.
it was that. Like the filu, the chiddush there is that even though they're different animals, we're still worried about the tyra of goofy.
Right, but that's the argument that anyway.
Yeah. Now, whether or not the Yerushalmi and the Bavli hold the same way, I don't know, but it sounds like it here. That if this is about, and it's a confusing term, but it's about that you mixed up the bodies, is the way I understood it as well. I might have been biased there. I was trying to figure out if you could understand it as flavors. I don't think it works that way here. But and I was also biased because of the Mefarshim who all want to read it like the Bavli. So, but also, I mean, it's very interesting, right? The Yerushalmi ends the sugya. It sounds like halacha kelevi, right? Mutar, end of story. Which went against every halachic instinct that we had when we opened up this year. I just want to say that. Also, I just maybe can I point out one thing too is right. The language of the Yerushalmi sounds like lechatchila language. Well, maybe I'll ask. Does it sound? I gave it away what I think, but do we think it's lechatchila or b'diavad language?
I would say it sounds like lechatchila.
Good.
But
Wow.
I know from the Emshech that, you know, one would be mistaken to assume such.
Yeah, well, I'd say twice it, right? Mahu litzlot sounds like lechatchila. Like, you know, I've got two things here I want to cook in the same oven. One of them's not kosher, one of them is. And you come in, you know, can I do it? Right? It's not say, you know, mishit salu, right? There's no past tense verb there, right? It's which usually, you know, tips off a b'diavad situation. This doesn't sound like b'diavad situation.
B'diavad, even I think very often is sort of in a passive voice.
Yeah.
Shnei shipudim shenitzlu.
And Islu would be even better. Yeah, that would be actually a better version of it. And the Mishnah itself, right? That one, well, that's the interesting thing. I didn't think about this. The Mishnah itself, though, is Tanur Shehisiku bechamon, or Shehesiko, probably bechamon, shel truma ve'afabo. That actually sounds like b'diavad language in the Mishnah. So I don't know what to do with that necessarily halachically yet. We're going to see, of course, right? Halachically, there will be some.
I feel like we get.
You go for it, Lexi. Sorry. Yeah, go for it.
Oh, just that, like, yeah, I think that, like, between the different sources that we have, we get kind of a confusing jumble of whether to read the, like, Reichalav Miltahi thing as Lechatchila versus, like, the Eved thing. Because, like you said, there's the Hisiko, which is, like, more b'diavad language, and also, like, Shetzalu. On the other hand, like, the, like, Litzalot and Mutar implies Lechatchila. And also, like, the, like, Lav Klumhu, which is the language we see, isn't like a, oh, it's not so bad. Like, that's kind of language of like, it doesn't matter.
Good.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, there are places where, you know, the low klum does have all sorts of, just like I was thinking, right, the whole thing of like how you say after things that are shakol, right? It says vilav klum, you know, vilom klum or something like that in the Gemara, and the Reef jumps in, borei nefashot rabot, right? You know, is klum there. But yeah, but in general, I think you're right. The klum really sounds like, yeah, there's like zero problem with this, not even like a lechatchila problem. But all right, good. So with that, unless there are any other questions, let's move on to the Bavli Psachim. I want to focus, I know that, and I brought it at the end of this, the Avodah Zarah piece, but since part of that is brought here anyway, I thought we'd focus on the Bavli. And it's a fairly long piece anyway, although I don't think it's particularly the hardest Shakla Vitaria, but although, you know, maybe it is. Who wants to read the Bavli here? Maybe, let's see. Yavni, you're next. You want to read or?
Sure.
Go for it. So I'll start with Amar. You get 2 words on one page, and then you go to the next page. So go for it.
אמר רב, בשר שחוטה שמן שצלו עם בשר נבלה כחוש אסור. מהי טעמה? מפטמי מהדדה. So we have, Should I? Yeah.
Yeah,
how
explain that
often
because
do
I
we
think it's
do
an important position here.
Sure. So we have we're roasting a fat kosher thing with a lean nevela, and it's forbidden to eat them. Because it like the fatme. This is what we talked about earlier. Is like it that it like it somehow gets like the flavor or something, like the fatness somehow. It gets fattened from it.
Yeah, it makes it a better conduit, we would say, or something like that for mixing flavors or something like that. I mean, fatme literally means to fatten up, but it's
Right.
yeah. This, by the way, we saw this, right? If you're roasting two things that are touching each other, right, or two very hot things, and one of them is fat and one of them is lean, even if the asur thing is lean, it kind of becomes fattened by the mutar thing, and then transfers its flavor back.
Right. That's what this is. That's this source, right?
Well, good. Yeah, except here it might be what Rav is talking about is that they're not
touching,
right? It's not so clear. It's shit salu in basar, which, by the way, again, we're back to the diavad language, I think, right? But it does seem to be a case where they're not touching. That was the way I understood it. It's the way a lot of people understand it. So.
ולוי אמר, אפילו בשר שחוטה כחוש שצלו עם בשר נבלה שמן מותר. So Levi takes the extreme other position that even if the nevela is the one that's fat and it's being roasted with a lean kosher one, then it doesn't mix and forbid it. מאי טעמה ריחה בעלמהו וריחה לאו מילתהו. And what's Levi's reasoning that it's just ריחה and ריחה isn't a thing.
Great. That's
עביד לוי עובדה בריש גלותא בגדי ודבר אחר. So, and Levi has a practical example of a case that happened in the house of Rish Galuta where they roasted a gdi with a pig.
Yeah, right. Devar acher is usually, I think in the Gemara, is always either pig, avodah zarah, or some sort of sexual prohibition, right? It shows up in all three of those.
And I assumed in this case it was a pig.
It's a pig. Yes, it's probably not with avodah zarah, but
yeah, and probably not a sexual.
Yeah, so yeah. It's like, no, granted, what goes on in the Rish Galuta's house in general often comes under scrutiny, but Levi himself does this, right? He's
right.
Practicing this thing. So okay, go for it.
So we bring this challenge that we have said about the two psachim. We're worried about the ta'arovet and we don't roast them together. Mm-hmm. Which again, anyway, yeah. My love ta'arovet ta'amim, my love ta'arovet ta'amim v'kashya lelevi. And the challenge is like, doesn't this mean that we're talking about a mixture of flavors that coming out of roasting two things together, and therefore it's a challenge on Levi's mekil position. Lo mipnei ta'arovet gufin. No, the Gemara holds like Lexi, and it's because you might mix up the bodies. Hachinami mistabra midekatani seifa, afilu gdi v'taleh. And this makes sense based on the seifa, where it says even if one of the pesachs is a gdi and one of them is a goat, a kid, and one of them is a lamb. If you think it's about mixing up the bodies, then it makes sense that they would have to say even these two bodies. But if you're talking about, if we had been talking about the mixing of flavors, what difference would it make that it's a goat and a lamb or a goat and another goat?
Great, right? And this, just to make clear, I think everyone's got this, but I'll be the pedagogical for a minute, right? Is the fact it says afilu means that that's a case we would have thought would have been mutar. So why does it have to specifically call out that case? Because they're different gufim. You might think you wouldn't mix those up. Even then, we're concerned about mixing them up in terms of the body, not in terms of the flavor.
Right.
So
right. Although we do make a distinction between mixing flavors of min b'mino and min b'she'eino mino.
Great.
but-
And that's, I don't know if anyone saw the daf al daf I brought at the end of this. I stuck at the end of the
Oh,
search the other night. He gets into that question of Rav, who actually does hold that min b'mino, right, is b'mashihu is a problem. Like, then maybe like we see, we're going to see about, matzah on Pesach or stuff like that, or chametz on Pesach, that might actually be a problem. So, but anyway, for the moment, we're not there. So we'll keep going.
אלא מאי על כורכך מפני תערובת גופין, מפני תערובת גופין הוא דאסור. אבל תערובת טעמים שרי. So therefore we have to conclude that the issue with those is only when you're worried about the bodies getting mixed up and not, and if all you have to worry about is a mixing of flavors, then it's permitted.
Great.
Lema tiyufta derav, and therefore we would say that we're rejecting Rav's opinion.
Yeah. Well, this sounds like a good challenge to Rav, right? You can therefore cook, just like the Yerushalmi concluded, right? You can cook 2 psachim in the same oven and not worry about their flavors mixing. That sounds like clearly Reicha is not a problem at the end of the day.
Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah hacha mabayin askinan kagon shetzal'o b'shtei kderot. And so now we're trying to find a way for Rav to work anyway. And so Rabbi Yirmiyah proposes that that's only for the case where you have these 2 psachim and they're in separate pots.
Great.
Yeah. Are we really talking about pots? No. Ela ema ke'en shtei kderot. Something that is effectively like having 2 pots, where you're not going to mix the flavor, or even the smell, but you might get confused which one is in which. Pretend not really pot, but something like a pot.
Exactly, right. Rashi reads it as like, if I remember correctly, like a mound between the 2 of them, but which, by the way, right, and I think it's important halachically to notice that Rabbi Yirmiyah's statement here means that probably even Rav, like lechule alma, if you have them in 2 different kederot, maybe that's mutar, right? So potentially, but I think that's, is a good, I understand that as a good halachic reading of the sugya at this point. So, but happy to be argued with. Okay, but now we've got to read this Mishnah per Rabbi Yirmiyah per Rav. So go for it.
והרי כאמר אין צולין 2 פסחים כאחד מפני תערובת. מהי תערובת? תערובת טעמים. So then we read this, that according to Rav, reading this Mishnah, that we don't roast 2 psachim together because of mixing. What kind of mixing? The mixing of flavors. ואפילו כאין שתי קדרות, דליקה תערובת טעמים, אסור משום תערובת גופין. And then even if we have it in 2 separate vessels in some sense, then it's still asur, because then we're worried about ta'arovet gufin, ve'afilu gdi v'taleh, and that's where the even gdi and taleh, even the goat and the lamb come in.
Great. So we'll stop there for a moment, right? That's right. So we have essentially our concern with Pesachim in general, with the Pesach, Korban Pesach, is that you get somebody else's Korban Pesach that you're eating, right? It could be the tam, it could be the goof itself. And the way Rav would have to read this is that, yes, we're concerned with both things in this Mishnah. We're concerned with any type of tarovet. That could be the tarovet of tam, it could be the tarovet of goof. So at the end of the day, right, so far the Bavli, right, before we get into the fact that this might be a Tannaitic debate as well, has given us good reason given a good way to read this Mishnah in Pesachim, both per Levi and per Rav, right? So we don't have a conclusive evidence, the way that the Yerushalmi seems to just side with Levi at the end of the day. So, okay, maybe we'll someone else take over, because I was making you read a lot there. So Lexi, you're next on my screen, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Sorry, where are we picking up now?
We're picking up
Amar Rav Mari.
Yeah.
Okay. Amar Rav Mari, Katanai. Harota pat chamav nana al pi chavit yain shel truma. Rabbi Meir oser, Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yossi matir b'shel chitin, v'oser b'shel so'orim, v'nei she'so'orim shoevot. Okay, so this is the beginning of the section that we have almost identically in both the Pesachim and Avodah Zarah.
Yeah.
So Rav Mari says that this is like a parallel to a Tannaitic dispute, where we talk about like hot bread that I brought out and I put it on top of a barrel of yain of truma. Rav Meir says the bread is aser. Rabbi Yehuda says it's permitted. Rabbi Yossi says it depends on the type of bread. And that's sorim are like forbidden because like these just show up, they like draw out the smell, flavor, whatever more.
Exactly. And can I just pause you for 1 second here, just from my own instinct, and people can, maybe give thoughts about this. There are certain things that if you cook, if you put it in an oven, seem to just absorb the flavor of the things or the smell of the things around them better than other things, right? Which seems to be Rabbi Yossei's position here, is that, yeah, for some things it's reicha is a problem, for other things reicha is not a problem. Which means that Rabbi Yossi thinks reicha is a problem, just it's not always a problem. So, but
yeah, which
yeah,
we'll get into. But the idea like a mitzvah dispute. Fine. My love tonight here. Demar savar reicha miltahi, lav miltahi, Demar savar reicha miltahi. So he's like, can we say that like this dispute is just about like whether they also like disagree with regard to reicha? And then Levi vadai tonight. Levi, fine, he has to concede. Like he has to say at least that it's a tanai, because like there's no other way of really explaining Rabbi Meir here. Like goes there. However, Larav Nema Tanaihi, Amar Lecharav, Tukule Alma Reicha Miltahi, Lav Itmar ala Dahahi, Amar Bar Barchana, Amar Ish Lakish, Vipat Chama V'Tucha, Ziver Hakol Asor, Vipat Sonet V'Chavit Megupa, Davriya Kol Mutar, Lo Nechaku Al Vipat Chama V'Chavit Chatuma, Upat Sonenet V'Chavit Tucha. So while Levi has to acknowledge, like has said like he can't make a better claim than that.
Yeah.
Rav could actually say, like, it's not even a Tanai. They all support me. And that basically, it's basically just a dispute about, again, like the mitzvot of the thing. Is how Rav could say is that everybody like believes that reicha is like a milta. And the disagreement is really just about in what scenarios it is like significantly present enough that it is like required to oser the thing, right? And so like when we have an example from this main Rav Reish Lakish, which is like everybody agrees that like with hot bread on an open barrel, it's forbidden, and that like everyone agrees that with like cold bread on a closed barrel, like there's not going to be smell exchange there, so it's fine. The disagreements are like the intermediate cases. And so Rav could be like, this thing that we're talking about with like the shchuta and the nevela is like the pat chama b'chavit ptucha, that like everybody would agree reicha is a milta here. So yeah, Rav doesn't even have to say that there are people who disagree with him.
Exactly. Which I was actually thinking, just based on time, we could probably stop here. But right, and I think if I were like reading this right now, I think there's a good reason you can make a claim that halacha kerav, right? Because it seems to be pushing towards Rav can claim I've got Tanaitic support on my side, and Levi's like I had to pick a side on Tanaim at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, also even the last bits that like, as you said, are less crucial because they're just kind of statements. But on the other hand, also, and we'll see Rishonim try and like deal with this, but like further imply that Rav kind of wins in this sugya, because like the last couple of statements are also about cases in which it seems that we are like determining something's status and what we can't eat it with based off of it having been cooked in the same space, implying that those statements, those like Memrot, also are according to the idea of Reicha Miltahi.
Exactly. Yeah, and it seems to be that the preponderance of actual cases, as you said, are in the Amoraic world, is that a word? Among the Amoraim, is that reicha miltahi, don't eat this, right? We get a basar b'chalav case, essentially, or it's like bread with basar, and then you can't eat it with kutach. Kutach is always that great stand-in, and so forth. So, but with that, let's actually look at the Rishonim and how they play this out, and the Rashi and the Tosfot are going to be very important. And Asher, I skipped you somehow, like you ended up somewhere else on my screen, but so I'm going to go back to you if that's okay. You want to take the Rashi?
Sure. Where are we? Amalecha?
Yeah, Malacha Rav, yeah.
Amalecha Rav, dichul eyal marecha milta. V'tama de Rabbi Yehuda, mishum tepat sonenet, chavit plus Masoret
You should read
okay, so I'm just,
Migufahi.
right. Okay. טיפת צוננת מגופה היא, ולא היה בר ריחה.
Yeah, migupa, by the way, would be like a stopped up barrel, like a barrel that's closed up. Yeah.
Okay. ולא היה בר ריחה, דמי לאו איתמר עליכולי. ואף על גב, דקיימה תנאי, I'm having troubles reading this.
Oh, sorry.
You know what? Do me a favor. Skip me for a second. I'm going to open it on my own screen with one of the sites, and I'll be able to see easier. So I'll let somebody else read now, and I'll
No
read
problem.
next.
No, you're next, and this is where we want to really read anyway. That right, Ve'afal gav, starting Ve'afal gav. So.
Ve'afal gav dekaima tanae kivate derav hilchata kivate levi. So even though we have these tanaim that are holding like Rav, the halacha follows Levi. Deha iflugu ba abai ve'rava gabe ba'tiha. Because Abaye and Rava all disagree about this regarding the straw or the opening into the barrel in Masechet Avodah Zarah. The Kamle Rava b'shitate de Levi ve'amar reichilav miltahi ve'abai ve'Rava helchata kerava. And Rava goes up according to the shita of Levi and says reichilav miltahi. And whenever there's a dispute between Abai and Rav, the halacha is like Rav. Abai and Rava, the halacha is like Rava. V'chenhu b'tshuvat hagonim. That's the same, and this is also what the Tshuvat hagonim says. V'af mishmo shel Eliezer ben Yitzchak ne'amar li delo chayashla. And also in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yitzchak, would say that we don't need to be concerned for reicha.
Exactly. So this, by the way, just to remind people, the Avodah Zarah case, right, is a case of, it turns out, I didn't know this, but makes sense that wine barrels, you have to be able to smell the wine, see if it's good or not. And so they had this bat-tiha, this thing that you used to be able to do to kind of tap the barrel and take a whiff. Is it still smell like wine or is it vinegar? I think that's what it is. It's what it sounds like to me. Maybe better connoisseurs can tell me better. And the question is, well, if I smell Avodah Zarah wine, is that a problem? There's also a question of if a non-Jew smells my wine, is that a problem? Does it make it Avodah Zarah wine? And Rava, who gets the halacha over Abaye, he says no, because there's no problem with recha. He holds like Levi, and therefore we must hold recha lav miltahi at the end of the day. So did people agree with my summary there? That and so that's how Rashi gets his halacha. Sorry, jump in.
Joel, I agree with your summary.
Yeah.
But something seems to have been added. It's like an interesting, this whole notion of smelling the wine for a certain purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Is anything added there? I mean,
well, there's going to be a question about whether or not that's a different case. Smelling wine might be very different than cooking two things together. Right. You can imagine two things. One, recha may not be hana'ah, but it might be a problem when enough of it gets in an oven with your stuff. Or the flip side, this might be like, if you're going to permit this, then you're going to permit everything. All the more so, maybe even
if you're going to permit this, give a fuller line.
Yeah, so if you're going to permit, right, smelling, getting the smell of reach from wine, from like Avodah Zarah wine, then, Abaye might be against that, but he might say, yeah, but if it's in like an oven, which is hot and the thing is burning off all the time, that's not a problem, right? It's only a problem of there's nothing lit on fire here. There's no, there's no fire, there's no burning, you're literally, putting your nose right up to a barrel of wine. You're getting the best reach you possibly can in some ways, right? This is meant to be like a smell versus when I cook two things in the oven, there's not really exchange of reach. There's no intent to exchange reach, right? That's not the purpose here. You haven't built the oven so that my bread imbibes the smell of the chazir that's in the oven.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's hopefully that's helpful. Happy to open that up from here. We're going to see, of course, the Tosfot are going to disagree with Rashi, but okay. If nobody's going to jump in, let's take a look at the Tosfot then. Asher, are you good to read the Tosfot? There's two pieces here that I wanted to look at.
Yeah, where am I starting? My left Arovat Tamim?
This is Tosfot from Psachim. It's Asra Rava mi Prazikia.
Asra Rava mi Prazikia, וכולי. וכאן פוסק רבנו תם כרב ורבא נמי, דשארי בבתתיה. מתי סבר קבעתי ושם מפורש, ובתנורים גדולים שלנו נראה דמותר לאפות לחם עם אותו פשטידה, that's funny they have פשטידה then, עם אותו פשטידה, הואילו מכוסות היטב אבי, כאין שתי קדרות, ואפילו...
ומכוסות היטב, הווה כאין שתי קדרות, yeah.
הווה כאין שתי קדרות. ואפילו, what's פלונדש?
פלונדס, yeah, I don't actually know what it is.
אוקיי, פלונדש, שיש להרחיק, אין נראה לרבי שהיה אסור, שיש אוויר מרובה בתנור, וההבל מתפשט.
Great.
Okay, so he's saying from here, Rabbeinu Tam agrees with Rav and with Rava that in a...
I think he says he agrees with Rav, and even Rava, right, who is Shari in the Basiha case, he agrees with Rav too, nonetheless, right?
Okay. And they're going back to Avodah Zarah. It says in there, it said that in the large tanurim, and this goes back to the question.
That's all. I'm going to pause you there. That's the Tosfot's Psak Halacha from the Gemara. Now the Tosfot are going to give you the reality of their world, though.
Okay.
So Tanurim, yeah.
In the large ovens that we have today, and I'd be curious to know what defines large. Is it large by our standards today?
Good.
What they were talking about. That's a question I'll leave open because I just don't know. It seems that it's fine to bake bread with the pashtida as long as they're both covered well, because that's as if when you have them covered well, it's in two separate pots. And even this paldon-ish, whatever that is, that I guess something that you're supposed to try to keep away from it. It doesn't seem to Rabbi that it should be a problem because there's this there's so much air within the tanur that it all just dissipates.
I would say diffuses, right? It's like there's, that's the way I was understanding it, right? So the Tosfot essentially say halacha is recha miltahi, but there's no concern in our ovens because we have big ovens, and the reach at the very least, if they're like covered things. And we'll get this right. Pashtita is, if I understand it correctly, I know people who make it, is a milchik thing that you would cover with dough on top of it, right? It would be that the top would be dough, and that dough counts as a covering. That's a good covering to keep the reach of the either that it's milchik or is it fleishich? It's one of the two. And I didn't give you guys this, but right, generally we don't make fleishich or milchik bread, right? Bread has to be parve with a few exceptions. And that's okay though, because it's covered up, and therefore that's like they're in two different kederot. Remember that I think it was the Rebbe Yirmiyah, right? And even then, like even maybe in this Tosfot, even if it's not covered, right? There's so much space in these ovens that the reach, even though it's a milta, it doesn't actually. There's not enough of it to cause any problems at this point. All right, that seems to be. So the Tosfot says the Gemara says it's asur, right? But the reality we live in isn't the reality of the Gemara with these tiny ovens that they had. I don't really, we'll get, I'm saving it for when we get to Basar B'Chalav about how many esronim the oven has to hold, or maybe the bottom to count as a big oven. But nonetheless, we see the Tosfot kind of split the Gemara's psak from the reality of their world in some ways. So, but, and maybe to put it, I'll say one more thing to put it a little bit differently is recha milta, but you got to be really close to each other to actually have recha be milta. In other words, it has to be enough, to put it in modern science, enough molecules of the thing have to go from one to the other. And so if there's enough air in between them, airspace, then it's not a problem. So, okay, that's the first Tosfot, but the second one I think is important as well. Do you want to do that one too?
Okay. Haka kamashma dan kevan delot achia Shabbat delot achia Tuma.
Ve'im afu hamatzot b'shivat yimei haPesach.
Hold on. That's on the Amud Haba here. Why am I not finding this?
It's right after that Tosfot from Sachim you just read.
Oh, I had something else right after. I was reading something else that was.
But are you looking at a source sheet, or if you're looking on the daf, then it's?
No, I'm looking on a website.
Oh,
I I was having
Oh,
troubles reading from the source sheet, which
no
is why
problem.
I,
Okay, this is a different Tosfot from Avodah Zarah. So let's see who would be
okay.
next. I'll pick on somebody here. Josh, I got you to read. Andres, do you want to read?
Yes.
Mhm.
ואם עפו המצות בשבעת ימי הפסח ונמצאת חיטה וחמץ באחד מהן, כולן אסורות, ובתנור נמי יש לאסור דאף על גב דתנורים שלנו ריחה לאו מילתא היא, מכל מקום ניהו או נהי
Yeah.
נהי דטעם ליקה, מכל מקום משהו בעלמא איכא, ואפילו במעשה תנור דלאו פתום.
Yeah. So right, this is the case,
So-
right? Go ahead. Explain, please. Yeah.
So if you baked matzot during the 7 days of Pesach, and then you found out that there was some chita or chametz inside of the tanurim of the ovens, then all the matzot are of course forbidden, and also you have to forbid the oven themselves, even though today our ovens, the smell is nothing.
Mhm.
מכל מקום נהי דטעם ליקה. But however, you would say that there is flavor, or that
There
there
is-
isn't flavor.
There isn't flavor, but what is there?
מכל מקום משהו בעלמא איכא. But however, there is something.
Exactly.
Okay. And therefore, אפילו במעשה תנור דלאו פתום.
Yeah,
I
even-
don't get that.
Even for a non-fatty thing that you're cooking in an oven, right? Because remember, right, bread is, or matzah, right? The whole one of the things we talked of, like, at least if one of the pieces of meat was fatty, whether it be the mutar or the asura, that might be a problem per Rav. Here, right, you have bread, you have matzah, and what was hopefully going to be matzah, but turned out you messed up. And those aren't fatty things. And nonetheless, even though there's not a lot of recha between the two, there's something in the air that they're exchanging between each other. And for chametz befesach, right, that's asur b'mashu, and that's a problem. So
I have a small thing here.
yeah, please.
It is a matzah, it's just not a kosher matzah.
You're right. Sorry. Yes, that's
And
it.
therefore it affects all the other matzahs. And Andres, I wasn't sure at the beginning, you were referring to pots or whatever. I mean, they talk about matzahs together. And one matzah is a wicked matzah.
Yes, that's
That's
but which, by the way, right, would be is, and in the Tosfot, this is a side note, but right, is only a problem during the 7 days of Pesach, theoretically, right? And that's why they say b'shivat yemei Pesach, and not a problem if you made them before Pesach, when it would be it would be mivat, there would be bitul potentially. So, but all right, and the only thing I wanted to read from the Reef was so I'll actually read this. This I didn't do that right, but can people see where I highlight? I think they can, right? The Reef says here, "Velevi lo kashare hechin ela diavad halevi shit salur shit salao kamar, right? Velo amart solim lechatchila." All right, and the Reef is going to rule that I think he's going to rule like Levi, but he's going to say, but only in a b'diavad. Levi himself is only ruling b'diavad. You can't go. You come to an oven. Well, we can argue later about what lechatchila and b'diavad actually mean. But you have like a communal oven. There's a pig cooking in that oven. You can't go put your dish in that oven, assuming it's at least uncovered, because this is only a b'diavad. I happen to do it, or it happened already. That's a problem. That's not a problem. But lechatchila, we can't do that. So I want to see. Let's see the Rosh. We're gonna skip to Torat Habayit. I think would be a good case, and then we'll take a break if that works. Rabbi?
Just one last question, Joe.
Yeah.
But not lechatchila. When did that start? That notion that you can't do it lechatchila.
I think the Reef. Well, I mean, the Reef is going to claim that is the way to read the Gemara, right? Because it uses the past tense verb shitsal and not.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
But the Reef, as far as I know, is the first source that makes that claim. The reef is pretty early halachically, right? So that's
Right.
Okay. So let's look at Torat Habayit from the Rashba, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll look at our more modern works of the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. Let's see, who has not read? Or are we going to come back around? We're going to come. Yavni, you read. Did you read? You were my first, right? Yavni, you're up again. Torat Habayit.
I wasn't first, but I can do it. I think, yeah.
Okay.
ויש איסור אוסר ברכו, דגרסינן, ויש איסור אוסר ברכו, and there is such a thing as an isur that makes something else asur just by transmitting fragrance.
Exactly.
דגרסינן בפסחים, פרק כיצד צולין, אמר רב, בשר שחוטה שמן, שצלו עם בשר נבלה, כחוש, אסור, מה טעמה? מפתם לי. היי להאיך, והדר האיך מפתם להי. So that was what we looked at. The kosher fat one with the lean. Should I retranslate this? Is
Yeah, I think it's good because I think he explains it well. So
with the lean. The lean nevela, it is forbidden. What's the reason? Because it like fattens from one to the other and goes back and fattens from the one to that.
Exactly, right. It creates like a conduit of fat that goes from the kosher thing to the lean non-kosher thing that goes back and gives the flavor over to the
flavor. Right.
Okay.
והדנקט בשר שחוטה שמן שצלו עם בשר נבלה כחוש לריבותה נקטה, לומר שאף על פי שאין בשר הנבלה שמן, אלא שנתפתה מריח שמנו של שחוטה, אפילו הכי אסור. וכל שכן אם היה בשר נבלה שמן. And the fact that that he used the phrasing of the kosher one being fat and that's being roasted with the treif one being lean, in order to, that shows that it's even though the unkosher meat is not itself fat, rather it gets fattened from the fragrance of the fat one, of the fat kosher one. Even so, it's still asur, and all the more so if the nevela were itself fat from the beginning.
Yeah, l'rivuta naktera. He picked this case, right, to be expansive, essentially, right, to include all the other cases. So
right.
Okay.
ולוי אמר, אפילו בשר שחוטה כחוש, שצלו עם בשר נבלה שמן, מותר. And Levi, as we saw, takes the opposite extreme. מאי תמה, ריחה בעלמא הוא וריחה לאו כלום. And what's Levi's reasoning? That it's only ריחה, and ריחה isn't anything. מכל מקום, משמע דתרווי הוא מודו, ששניהם כחושין שהוא מותר דריכה כי היי לאו כלום.
Lav klum. It goes to the next page.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a difference really.
In any case, they both agree that if both are lean, that it's permitted by, I guess the way to read it is if it's permitted if the transmission would have been by fragrance, because then it's nothing. I don't. Yeah, the phrasing's a little confusing.
He's making the claim that both of them, both Rav and Levi, in the case where they're both kachush, if you have two lean pieces of meat in the same oven, that's mutar l'kule alma, right?
Right.
Because there's no method of transfer anymore. It has to have some reach of fat essentially in order to make some sort of transfer happen. And that's really, he's claiming the debate that's happening between Rav and Levi is only in cases where there's some fat that helps with the transmission. If there's no fat at all, like the case of bread, is two pieces of bread in the same oven, for instance, that's not a problem. But you can imagine, if a Kohen put their challah, in the oven with your regular bread, right? That sounds like to Rav and Levi maybe not a problem. So, all right. Any final comments before we take a pause, and then we'll go to the tour on the Shulchan Aruch? Okay. So we'll go on a 5-minute break. Come back. I have 3:03 right now on my clock, so 3:08, and I will stop the share and stop the recording for the moment. Here. Try that again. Okay, and just Rav Nachum told me, and I think he's very right here, that just to remind people, right? Rashi rules, sounds like lechatchila, like Levi, that there's just no, recha is not a problem. And you know, as we were talking over the break, I put my bread that I took out of the oven that was cooked in an oven with pork. It smells like pork. Doesn't matter. It's reach. Reach is not a problem. It's not a halachic problem to have reach, and that's perfectly fine. Tosfot ruled that, well, we actually, like, technically from the Gemara, we rule like Rav, right? Which is that same recha miltahi, but practically,
No, and that bread is asur.
It's asur, right? It smells like pork. That's a problem. But in our world, our ovens are too big, and we don't actually ever have that problem, right? That there's no way that I took oven out of my bread out of the ovens in the Tosfot's world, and it's gonna smell like pork because they're big. They're big ovens. The smell dissipates, and therefore it's just not a practical reality. Which imagine the Tosfot, even though they end up effectively ruling like Rashi in their world, they might say that if either you could smell it actually, or potentially if you had a small oven, that might be a problem. But the Rif, it's not obvious to me, if I remember correctly, how the Rif sides, but he makes the claim that he seems to side like Levi perhaps, but he makes the claim that Levi, to match him up with all those cases that we skipped, Levi thinks b'diavad you're fine, but even Levi thinks lechatchila I can't go put my bread in an oven with pork. That's not because recha lechatchila we avoid, even though at the end of the day recha lav miltahi. So. Hopefully that's a good summary of where we are. And the only other thing I want to just remind us is the Rashba here, where the Rashba thinks that even though recha is a problem, it's only a problem when there's fat, and that to transfer the smell via reach, or maybe fat's the only thing that creates real reach. That is something we could do different versions of the Rashba's reality here. But other than that, but for unfatty things, it's not a problem. Although maybe the Rashba would agree with the Tosfot that for things that are asur b'mashahu, that would still be a problem. So, so with that, I'm going to stop my screen share, and we're going to go to our classic sources, starting with the tour in Kuf Chet. Of course, now that I stopped my screen share, my order is messed up for all of you. So. I'll just have to make it up again. Josh, I'm going to make, maybe you were the first person who read. So I'm going to make you read the tour Kuf Chet, if you don't mind. Just go through the whole thing. It's not very long.
אוקיי, ריח של איסור שנתערב בהיתר, כגון בשר נבלה שצלעו בתנור עם בשר שחוטה, פליגי בי רב ולוי. רב אסר ולוי שרי. ופסק רש"י כלוי דשרי. Okay, so we have the machloket we knew. Rav says it's forbidden, Levi says it's permitted. Rashi holds like Levi to permit. And this is the whole team Rashi.
Yeah.
וכן כתב בהאג ורבנו תם. כן כתב בהאג.
Yeah.
Yeah. ורבינו תם פסק כרב דאסר, ואפילו בשר נבלה כחוש עם בשר שמן שחוטה, דריח כי היי מילתהי. Okay, so Rabbeinu Tam and his team follow Rav, who says it's forbidden no matter what, even if it's lean nevela meat with fatty kosher meat, because reach is a real issue. וכתב הרשב"א, הסכמת רוב המורים להתיר. Rashba says most instructors
Mhm.
permit this. מכל מקום לכתחילה אסור לצלותם בתנור צר. ואם בא לבשלם בקדרה, כל אחד לעצמו, אפילו בתנור צר, אפילו בתנור צר. So then it's making new distinctions. Even though all these people said it's mutar, lechatchila we should be strict and forbid.
In which case?
In roasting things in a small oven
Exactly.
together, unless they're in separate pots.
Mhm.
In which case, even in a small oven or a thin oven, it would be permitted.
Yeah, and keep going. He keeps qualifying that.
אפילו בתנוצר, ופי הקדרה מגולה, מותר. So even if the top of the pot is open, it's still mutar.
Yeah.
In this case, if they're in separate pots. ואפילו לכתחילה, שאין ריח המתבשל כל כך אוסר. Because in this case, when they're in separate pots in the same oven, there's not so much reach going around.
Yeah, by the way, so
it's like less molecules.
Yeah. So before we get to like his according to the way the Torahs understand the Rashba here, right? The Rashba thinks Recha Miltahi or Recha Lav Miltahi?
Milta.
Good. Yeah.
Milt, but it's not really it's less of a binary.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's a thing, but just not that much of a thing. It's like kind of a thing, right? It's I have different ways I could guess to understand that, but it's like, you know, I love that. I think that line for me was very important. Right? It doesn't make it so asur. Makes it asur, just not so much. So, okay.
מסקנת אבי הראש ז"ל כרבנו תם.
I think what he means, by the way,
Yeah, so Rav Nachum, sorry, go for it.
yeah, tell me if you agree. I think that Reach HaMitbashel, he's distinguishing from the smell of roasting things. In other words, boiling things in pots in the oven has less of a smell because maybe because there's water mixed with it. You know, it doesn't reach as high a temperature, right?
Yeah.
It maxes out at 212 Fahrenheit.
So I was guessing that it was something like maybe a little bit different, that reach that was cooked. In other words, that when you get reach hot enough, it no longer is oser. If like at a colder temperature, that's almost like being burned off in some ways. Maybe I was influenced by somebody on that. I don't remember who it was. So
well, I think that's the point of Kedera being in the oven as being different. Why should it matter?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the point is that you're not really roasting it.
Yeah.
And up to now, we've really been talking about roasting things in the oven, like bread is dry heat and
yeah, I mean, I think that's a good, I like that reading. So, but let's go with it for a moment. That's what makes the difference between having it in a kedera versus having it open is that there's it's a boiling pot, shall we say? Like there's a new thing. I like to make rice in the oven instead of making it on the stove. What was that? Cholent?
Yeah. Cholent. They used to put cholent in the oven.
Yeah, cholent's that's the best way to make cholent. So
I tried it once, didn't work.
Oh, I was gonna at the end, if we have time, by the way, Rav Nachum has a great story about preparing Shabbat. It was a dinner and lunch with this, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll hold off for that surprise. So, all right. So and we have the Rosh is gonna rule, not surprisingly, like Rabbeinu Tam, which I brought the Rosh for you, but we skipped it in this case. But anyway, Josh, keep going for us, because
right. So he has this
is the Rosh
sort of a mutar approach.
Yeah.
The Rosh rules like רבנו תם, דווקא בתנורים שלהם שמכוסים, לכך נכנס הריח של זה בזה. But that's only in the ancient ovens of the Gemara, which were completely covered and all the smells mixed together.
Yeah.
אבל בתנורים גדולים שלנו, ופיהם פתוחים, אין לחוש. But in our ovens, which are big and they have an opening, we don't have to worry about this.
Right, so we've added another factor that it shows up in the Rosh, but we hadn't seen actually directly in the Tosfot, which was what?
The size of the oven.
We saw the size.
Yeah, and the
it's also
petach.
the size with the Reinu Tan, that's the opening.
The ovens are vented.
Yeah, exactly. They're vented ovens,
Vented.
which I believe all modern ovens are vented as well.
I don't think so.
Oh,
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Gas, no, there's a big discussion.
April-
Electric ovens that they have in Israel are not vented.
Only gas ovens are? Is that the?
I was reading in Rav Moshe's talks about this.
I looked at this.
whether
Rav
it's-
Moshe, the one he talks about if there's no zeah, that one that.
yeah, somebody asked him about that, but no, yeah, that's a different thing. That's Zaya. We have to have a whole other discussion is Zaya.
I know. I'm not going to go there tonight. Yeah. So,
That's a whole other discussion. We're talking about Reya. If there's Zaya, that's a whole different world.
Mhm.
We paskin in general is that Recha is lav milta, but Zaya is something, and that's a different problem.
so,
But and that's the venting. It helps with that maybe, but no, I was talking about something else. That a small opening to let the smoke out
mhm.
is not necessarily considered a vented oven. That's
Okay.
not good enough. And I don't know about, I mean, when I was growing up, we had an old oven and it did seem to have some, I remember it having some kind of holes in the back. I once cleaned it for Pesach or something. But I think most ovens are a square box. I don't think there's any, the fan that blows in the front is actually just between the metal of the box and the glass so that the glass doesn't get hot. So there's a fan, there's air rushing. You hear air rushing coming out of the oven. It's not from in the oven. It's just air circulating between the glass and so that the children won't burn their hands when they touch the glass.
Oh, that's no wonder how because my 1.5-year-old likes to always go up to the glass of the oven when it's cooking. But
yeah, so there's an air stream going between the metal of the oven. That doesn't mean that the oven is vented.
yeah. So well, I know some. I can't speak to all ovens. I know some ovens actually, which might be its own problem, vent through essentially the burners. Like there's a hole in one of the burners that comes from the oven up.
Those might be. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there might be gas ones like that, but the electric ovens are not like that.
So, but again, I also don't know all ovens, and I don't know how big the hole is and how well it vents either. And that's I think what this tour with the Rosh has opened up here is a whole question of, well, how big does this event have to be? And we're not going to look at this tonight, but maybe either next week or when we get to this Basar V'Chalav, the questions of, but where are the foods in relation to the vent might also matter as well. If all of the recha is milta, and you put your food that you care about right in front of the vent, and all the air is rushing there, that might be, a higher concentration of reach than you get in other places potentially. So, okay, good. That's the tour. Just to close it out, we should take a look at Dalet and Hay. So, Josh, if you want to finish those up for us, I have them as Dalet. I have the Sifim listed. You may not have in your copy of the Torah, but starting. Yeah, Pat Chama.
Yes. פת חמה שמונחת על גבי חבית פתוחה של יין נסך אסור, לפי שקולט את הריח הרבה. So hot bread, just any bread, which is laying on top of an open vat of יין נסך, is forbidden because it absorbs lots of the reach, the smell. אבל אם הפת צוננת, אפילו אם החבית פתוחה או פת חמה וחבית סתומה, מותר. But if you don't have both of those conditions, if it's cold bread on an open barrel of wine or hot bread on a closed barrel of wine, it's permitted. וכן מותר להריח בבתיה דיי נסך. פירוש נקב שעושים בחבית להריח משם ביין אם הוא טוב. And you're also allowed to smell the wine to see if it's good, even if it's the נסך.
Great. So, all right, which we saw that piece from Psachim. Well, that was from the second one was from Avodah Zarah, but we saw the first from Psachim. And since they are related matters, but with that, I want to go to the Shulchan Aruch unless there are any questions about the tour. I don't know if people noticed, by the way, that right the Beit Yosef there essentially says go see Sadi Zayin. I explain all of this, and which we will in a few months' time get to. But for the moment, let's move to the Shulchan Aruch and to Kuf Chet. And we're going to just do Seif Aleph, which has a very long Ramah to it, and then a couple of the Nosei Kelim. So, let's see. We had Lexi. You were next, I think, in the order.
Okay, so what are we looking at?
Shulchan Aruch Kuf Chet Seif Aleph. Insulin Basar Kshera.
Cool. אינסולין בשר כשרה עם בשר נבלה ושל בהמה טמאה בתנור אחד ואף על פי שאין נוגעים זה בזה. ואם סלן, הרי זה מותר. ואפילו הייתה אסורה שמינה הרבה והמותרת רזה. ואם התנור גדול שמחזיק 12 עשרונים ופיו פתוח, מותר לצלותם בו. ובלבד שלא ייגעו זה בזה, ואם אחד מהם מכוסה בקערה ובבצק וכיוצא בו, מותר לצלותם אפילו בתנור קטן ופיו סתום. Right, so their underlying thing is somewhat unsurprisingly kind of like, the sort of riff perspective of like, it's bidi eved, but recha milta, lav milta hi bidi eved, and so it's permitted. And then brings in also kind of like the Tosfot / Rashba, whatever perspective of like, depending on how big something is, it actually might be totally fine. Yeah, and also depending on whether they're like covered at all.
Great, and I want to just make a point about the covering there, right? That it says obebat sek bechayot sebo, and this I remember Rav Landis made a big point that Rav Landis, you maybe will comment, but or Rav Nachum, that in their world the equivalent of tinfoil, putting tinfoil over your pot or your pan, was to put some dough over the top of your what you were cooking. And that is enough to prevent an exchange of reach in their world. So, Rav Nachum?
Yeah, Lexi, you said it's like Tosfot? Why do you say it's like Tosfot?
Oh, just like the Tosfot and the Rosh, like the people who like following on like kind of the Riff Rambam thing, talk about how like the size and ventilation of the oven impacts like the lichatchila din.
What is the Tosfot hold?
That with big enough and well enough ventilated ovens, it's fine.
Yeah, I agree with that. But
right? Does he say anything? But he says reach is a milta, but with a big oven, it's fine. But he doesn't say anything about.
He agrees with the entire
this is saying asur lahatchila.
I'm saying he agrees with the Tosfot concept. The Tosfot think that the concept of recha miltahi is an existent one, but bimtziut, with big enough and well enough ventilated ovens, it actually is just a non-entity.
But where do you see here that he holds that it is a milta? I mean, in the Shulchan Aruch is agreeing with Tosfos that reach is milta.
No, I'm saying that he's agreeing with the concept of like a lichatchila din related to there being like large enough and well enough ventilated ovens.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so who do you think he really agrees with halachically, like as far as the broad strokes of the halacha?
The Rif.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, the Rif.
So that's what I said.
You're right.
I said that I think like his underlying shita is like the Rif, but then he expands. The Rif doesn't say anything about like sizes of ovens and how that impacts the lichatchila din.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he has like the basic shita of the Rif, and then brings in this concept that later Rishonim talk about, which is about whether you change based off of like how.
Lexi, you broke up there a little bit at the end, but I think this is probably what you said, right? Is it's kind of he's siding with the Rif, and then even the Rif says that you can only do this b'diavad, even though he agrees recha lav milta, you shouldn't lechatchila do it. But if you bring in the Tosfot's Mitziut about big ovens, then even lechatchila it's mutar, right? Is essentially the way, which is an interesting combination of shitot. Like it's
Okay.
So I completely agree. But I also think it is, I think Rav Nachum, you're pointing out, and I think it's a little strange that even though he's holding Mechalav Milteh, that he's using the Tosfot essentially to make it go
Well,
from Yavad to.
It's a kol shekain. It's a kol shekain. If Tosfot holds that reach is milta, and he permits lechatchila a big oven, then kol shekain I can permit a big oven.
Yeah.
Who hold that it's not anything. The real question is, where does he come up with the isser from? Where's the isser to do it lechatchila? If he holds reich as lav milta, then where does he get the whole idea of not doing it? And that's the riff, as Lexi rightly said.
So, but and I imagine that if you were we were to think about it the way and this is why I asked the question at the beginning tonight of like, how would you, if you were just like without any Gemara in front of you, that you're a Mora and you have to decide, or a Tana, you have to decide this halacha, like what do you think the Torah holds? Like, yeah, there's a lot of reason you want to stay far away from this idea of cooking something that's asur with something mutar in the same oven. It just, you can smell it. It feels like problematic, even if at the end of the day, recha isn't the thing that we're concerned with. It just, there is something that it's like, I don't know if I want to do this.
Well, it's, can you tighten your words? Are we worried that it's unsightly to put them in the same oven? Or are we worried about a different thing a little bit?
So it's two things. One is, it could just be a worry that like this could be, some sort of a gezerah, lest they touch, or lest you then, become too lenient about things. Well,
what I was thinking is, it's not that you're allowed to put them in the same oven if it's a big oven, and that should be unsightly also. What we're worried about is that we don't. What the point of the gezerah of the minhag of not putting them together is, we don't want to create reach. We don't want to create a milchik bread, bread that tastes like, or two things that taste the I don't know. You shouldn't really be cooking isser. I don't know why you're cooking isser. We don't want to. Your friend's oven is cooking pork, and you want to put your cholent in there. We don't want you to do that, because even though reach is not anything, we just don't want to create a treif reach about a kosher food.
Yeah,
even though it's permitted.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, you could also make a claim, right? And this is why a big oven might make a difference or may not, right? It is, if it's about a question of maybe they're going to touch each other, then even a big oven, you'd say, all right, b'diavad, you did it, it's fine, they didn't touch. But we shouldn't, in case they do touch. And a big oven would, forget reach in a big oven, you're just less likely to put two things that are touching each other in a big oven, right? It's you have a lot more room to put things separate.
But did you see that anywhere? Have you seen?
No, I have not seen that anywhere. This is my svara. This is only my svara. Yeah, I should say that. But you can also imagine somebody saying, "Oh, I had bread the other day that tasted like meat." Meat bread is fine, and you could eventually just be makil about that as well. We could be worried that people are. There's a little bit more of a slippery slope argument that gets made, sometimes in basar b'chalav.
No, but what I want to say is like this: it's not that it's unsightly to cook them together; it's unsightly to create treif smelling food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or unsightly is unsmelly.
That sounds good. I like unsmelly. Yes. All right. Let's see. Noam, you want to take the Ramah for us?
All right. V'hu adin lebasar im chalav nami dina hachi. So in this law with basar b'chalav, v'nohag, and then he cites Siman Sadi Zayin, which we will see at some point in the future.
Exactly.
V'nohagim lahachmir lechachila afilu b'tanor gadol ub'diavad lahakel afilu b'tanar katan. And we practice and we're accustomed to be stringent lechachila even with a big oven, but b'diavad we can be lenient even with a small oven. V'im afa pat im basar asor lachlo im chalav im yesh lo acher. And it's and if one bakes bread with meat, it's forbidden to eat that now meaty bread with milk if there's another piece of bread available. V'chen im oved kochavim afa pat im isor asor linot oto pat im yesh pat acher dechol ze mikrei lechachila. And similarly, if an idolater bakes bread with isor, that bread, and it's a sore to buy that bread if there's no other bread available, because all of this is in the category of lechachila. Aval.
In other words, but there's an important point. We're saying that lechatchila is usually it's b'diavad. The bread is baked.
Mm-hmm.
But it's for you, lechatchila, to go and buy it. But when? Only when there's other bread. If there's no other bread, we're not going to say you have to deny yourself bread, which you could say. You could think, oh, just don't eat bread. No, you're allowed to buy the bread even because reichas love milta. And even though it smells, it wasn't cooked with pork in the sense that as an ingredient, it was cooked next to pork.
So,
but this is called a bidiev. This is called the chatchila because you have another option, and you haven't yet bought it. In other words, you're not throwing away your money.
It's also from your perspective and not from the perspective of the idolater or the food itself.
You're saying it's not done because you haven't purchased it yet, right? Versus, yeah. So.
It's very different. If you cooked it in your oven with, your pork, you didn't remember that your pork was being cooked at that time, and now you took it out, that would be mutter to eat. That's really bidiev. Mm-hmm. Even though I haven't started to eat it yet. I can say
it would be interesting to know what the Ramah might say in the case of if I have other bread sitting there for that meal, right?
He did talk about that, right?
If I already have other bread, does he say?
That was for the case of
that was the case of milk and meat. That was the case of milk and meat where you could just eat the bread in a different occurrence.
Yes,
but where you would have to throw away the bread.
It's a more interesting question.
Then it would be bidiev. Then it would be then he would permit it, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. But I want to just also point out before Noam, I'll let you go on, that the shach and hay, I don't remember if I signed shach hay or not. I didn't. But this is on the Ramah, v'ima fa pat im basar, right? He's talking about this case that if you cooked bread and meat, that you lechatchila cannot eat it with milk. Right? And he defines lechatchila. He said, and the shach says, afilu betanur gadol ufiv patuach me'at lamala asur lechol im chalav. Right. And so this isn't even, we're talking about, and this seems to follow, right? We're talking about big tanurim. We're talking about the modern reality of we have a big tanur with an opening. Nonetheless, if I cooked my bread in the same oven that I cooked meat, I'm cooking challah and chicken at the same time. Not challah like the challah I took for the Kohen, but challah that for Shabbat. Then that I should not eat that lechatchila with milk. So, but okay.
By the way, what case in what heter case in the Mechaber did we so far not see any reticence from or any resistance to?
Good. I'll leave it open for people to say if they see it. If not, I'll jump in.
There's a case in the Mechaber that neither the Shach nor the Ramah have said is not a heter.
You mean that it's not an isur? You mean?
No, not a heter. In other words, that he gives the Mechaber gives another. He talks about a big oven, but he also talks about another heter.
Yeah. Okay, so we're on the same page here. Yeah, if it's in a separate kederot or if it's one of them's covered, right?
That's the main point. Separate kederot. Did he talk about that?
He doesn't. Yeah, so it's not so clear to me what the case is with the basar and the bread. But
he says im echad mehem mechuseh bekara. It's covered in a pot.
Yeah.
Oh, b'batzek, like you were talking, like we saw, covered with that dough.
Yeah.
Then even afilu katan. What is that? Mutter or bidievet or mutter lechatchila?
I think it's
mutter lechatchila.
Yeah, mutter lechatchila, mutter l'tamaf.
And that the Mechaber, when he said lo nogin can, he's not referring to that.
Mm-hmm.
He's only referring to the oven being to a big oven. That heter he's resisting.
Yeah. if they're both on, both roasting in the oven, or they're both on just like a pan or something like that, it's not a pan, like a, what are those?
Covered, no, well, my story.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so, but maybe it's all right. We'll wait.
I'll just say, all right, we'll wait. Okay.
We'll wait. All right. So no, I want to at least finish the Ramah here. So, okay. Yes, I think we're at the Yeshomrim, right?
I got a couple more words, but
You do?
aval in ein lo pa acher berevach mutar b'shnehem zemikri li'inyan diavad. Just defines what diavad. If there's not enough bread in abundance, then we're in diavad and you can eat them.
Good. Revach here, by the way, is like an interesting term, right? That it's, it's easy. This could, and I remember, I didn't look this time, but it's somebody I think says price might matter there, right? If I have two choices between avodah zarah bread and it's cooked maybe in an oven with isur, and I have other bread, but the avodah zarah bread is much cheaper. That might make a difference there. So
I think revach here means a quantity.
you do? You think it's just the availability?
I think he's saying you don't. Not only am I telling you don't have to eat rice, I'm telling you that if you want to have 6 slices of bread and you only have 3, you can eat the other one.
But well, actually, with that, I'm going to take a pause here because I want to look at the Taz Dalid. I didn't give that assign that, but let's see. Asher, do you want to jump in, and then Noam will come back to you? But the Taz and Dalid, does Zed Mikre Li'inyan Zed Diavad?
Hold on, I gotta open it up.
Okay.
It's on the sheet that you shared us, right?
It's not on the sheet. No.
No,
No.
it's in the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
Okay, just in Shulchan Aruch itself. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, no, I just had a different page open. Find it with the Taz. Sorry.
If not, we can.
Okay.
You go for
I
it.
got it. In Sulim Batzar?
No. Does Zed Mikre
Dalid.
Dalid? Does Zed Mikre Li'inyan Zed Diavad?
Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay. זה מקרה לעניין זה דיעבד, כתב בתורת חיים כלל.
Torah Chatat, but yeah, it's
מה?
Torah
Torah
Chatat.
Chatat.
Yeah.
תורת חטאת, sorry. כלל, ומכל מקום המנהג להקל לקנות מן העובדי כוכבים דברים מבושלים בכליהם, שאין בהם משום בישול עובדי כוכבים, דסתם כליהם. דסתם כליהם אינן בני יומן. ואף על פי דנותן טעם לפגם אסור לכתחילה, בכל מקום לא חשבינן הקנייה לכתחילה, לכן נוהגים היתר פה, קרקע לקנות, קרקעו, לקנות אגוזים שלמים, שמבשלים עובדי כוכבים או שאר דברים.
Great.
So he's saying the minhag is to be more makil on buying things from Ovdei Kochavim, things that are cooked in with their utensils, as long as there's no actual claim. Because there is no real cooking of Ovdei Kochavim.
Well, things that we don't care about, which we haven't done bishul akum. I don't know if we're doing it in this class or not, right? Imagine anything that's that's not in a category of bishul akum, which apparently nuts are not. Probably kings don't.
Because it has to be fit to go on the table of a king.
Yeah, and also they're eating raw too. So I think that might be
also has to be right.
That in those cases, even though we say the following, we say that lechatchila we can't say noten tan lifgam mutar, right? It's only b'diavad, right? And they're cooking them in their kelim, which haven't been used for 24 hours. We say stam kelim are not usually used in 24 hours. You would say lechatchila, I can't buy these because they've been cooked in avodah zara, in goyish pots or goyish vessels. Nonetheless, that purchasing them, that's actually a b'diavad situation. All right. Maybe they're the only ones making the nuts in the town, right?
Right.
The nuts available.
Good proviso. You'd have to add that in, that if there were other people making nuts who were kosher people, then you'd have to buy it. In other words, if it's actually an interesting question. if you go to a store and you see nuts with a hechsher and other nuts without a hechsher, and you say, well, it's all just nuts. It's all kosher. Maybe you have to buy the kosher ones, even if it's a little bit, I mean, I don't know if it's more expensive, but you maybe have to buy the kosher.
It sounds almost like I would think even another example. Let's say, for example, there's been a big balagan recently here in Modi'in about the opening of a Tif Tam store in the mall, which is not kosher. But if there are no other stores around, and I go there and I get things that have a hechsher, because some of the things that have hechshers, even though they also sell pork.
Well,
That's a different.
that's different.
So wouldn't that be saying, okay, if I'm going there, get something that's kosher, okay,
No,
I have
here
a
the
choice
nuts,
of going to a different store.
No, the problem with the nuts is that you actually are relying on bittul of the tam lifgam to eat those nuts, and we don't want you to rely on that bittul. We'd rather you get something that was cooked in a pot that was verified.
This might be a case like if you were at an amusement park, right? And there's no kosher nuts around, let's say, for instance. And let's pretend for the moment you've verified that the nuts are, all it is nuts being roasted, and you verified everything else that you need to verify, which is, I'm not gonna, make decisions about that.
You want to buy chestnuts.
Exactly. That might be perfectly fine to go to the non-Jewish vendor who's only making nuts in his kalim right now, and buy them, as long as but the moment that a kosher one pops up next door,
where are you seeing this provider in the Taz? The Taz seems to me to be saying that just like purchases
I'm adding it. I'm adding that's what he's claiming means b'diavad lechatchila. Like, I think it's the only way I can understand it.
Because we saw it in the Ramah.
In the Ramah
said it.
Yeah.
The Ramah said it about that if there isn't a kosher, he said, what did he say? He says, if you don't have bread, other bread. If you don't have other, he only gave you the permission to buy the bread from the Gentile if there was no other bread.
But that's for the case
Isn't
of bread that was in the oven with their treif meat.
Of Recha.
What?
What's the difference between? So the Taz is bringing in and saying that Tam Lifgam and Recha are equivalent. That just like Recha is Asr L'Chatchila and Mutter B'di'evid, so too Lifgam is Asr L'Chatchila to rely on that, but Mutter B'di'evid. But that B'di'evid is going to allow you to eat things when there's no other option, just like the bread.
Take a look at the Mishpatzot Zahav. I don't think he agrees with you.
Oh, good. What?
I always like to hear that.
Go for it. Say it.
So he says, "Ayen Taz v'rotzel amar de'afafat kol sheyesh pat acher mishum de yesh omrim recha milta ma she'en kach benoten tam lifgan hakinya chashiv diava afil yesh lo berevach mutar liknot devarim hamutalim b'kleihem im ein bahem b'shuach achlum." So he says, anytime you buy from a non-Jew nuts, it is b'diavad and it is okay.
He's saying always.
Yeah.
It's not
Always.
like me then.
He explicitly draws a distinction between bread and nuts.
Yeah. I thought you said he agrees with me.
No, he disagrees.
Yeah. Yes, your cause.
I also like to hear that.
Yeah, I didn't do that. And this is great, right? So I just want to, if I could summarize that, Noam, right? He says, no, right? Because we were, both Rav Nachum and I were saying that the Taz was only talking about a case, is to b'diavad if there's no other thing around, like the Ramah was talking about, and the Pri Megadim is saying no, right? B'diavad in this case is because it was already made by the non-Jewish vendor, and that's b'diavad, and it's not that buying it from him is considered b'diavad, which is not the case for Recha. It's different. So,
in other words, but first of all, the fact that Taz has to say this means that my understanding was a reasonable understanding.
Oh yeah, of course.
And secondly, in other words, he wouldn't discourage strange ideas. This is a possible. He's coming to say no. Don't read it like Rav Nachman read. But he's also telling us an interesting thing, which is that he's proving his point. What's his proof? His proof is that Yesh Omri Recha Milch. And there's nobody that says, there are those that say that Recha is Milta, but there is nobody that says that Tam Lifgam is a problem.
Yeah.
So he's saying once it's cooked, that's always called b'diavad. Nice. I agree with him.
Yeah, it's a good.
This is a fantastic heter, by the way.
It really is.
Has a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, but the problem it's not so practical because do you really know how something is made?
No, of course not. Especially like, the guy selling the nuts is also selling the hot dogs.
Mhm. Yeah. So,
Right. And you don't know what dripped and what, I mean, depends. Each case has to be thought about carefully.
so,
I mean, I was once in the Museum of Natural History in New York, and I wanted to eat, and my kids wanted to eat the corn that they boiled there in the cafeteria. I went to the cafeteria and I bought them some potato chips, whatever I could think of being kosher, an apple, and they wanted the boiled corn. And I thought to myself, well, it's a pot, it's b'diavad. What are they going to put pork in the corn when they cook it? They're going to cook milk in it. I mean, even milk would be all right. But so really, it's probably kosher. But I don't remember what I did. But it probably would be kosher. The truth is, a cafeteria I'm talking about, where there's like they just boiled up corn, and so this. But I think I didn't let them. But maybe I did.
But keeping with kids and being out and keeping kosher, it's like a whole other fight in the world that I mean I've experienced it. As for another time I'll tell a story about what Rachel did when we got invited to a birthday party with they were serving non-kosher food. Rachel made food and slipped it in for our daughter at some point. But they were serving pizza. Rachel brought pizza bagels. It was very impressive. But anyway, so. Let's finish up the Ramah if we could, and there was one hopefully other.
I didn't quite follow what distinction he is making from the bread. If we're saying that the bread is not really because the bread is also being bought after the fact, right?
It is, but but because there are people who do say that Reichas Milta, right? We're stricter about the bread than we are about Milta Tam Lifka.
Okay.
So actually, this kind of gives us a little bit of a light. Thanks for that question, because that gives us a little bit of light on maybe why actually we say l'chatchila we don't do it. We were saying maybe it seems unseemly, or we don't want to create this thing, even though it's mutter, and we are giving a different reason, which is a much more firmy kind of reason. Because we want to be yotzei kol hadayot.
Yeah.
We have these other, even though we paskin one way, we have there's a whole bunch of Moraim and Rishonim maybe who hold that it is a milta. So actually we're living in limbo. Our psak we have a psak, but we have a minhag to be worried about the other shita, says the Mishpat Tzav.
Well, I think that's just, you don't even need to go that far. You can just look the Shulchan Aruch. The fact that he holds by the Rif, right? That is like the definition of like halacha kilevi, but we're chayash harav, right? Like that, the entire edifice as codified here is based on that limbo.
Yeah. The one thing is the Rif himself makes the claim that he's actually not chayash to Rav, is that Levi himself just uses we're chayash to I guess we could say we're still chayash to miltahi, right? Just Levi himself uses b'diavad language. So but
right.
Good.
We didn't know why Levi uses b'diavad language. That's really the question. If the Rif is right, so what's Levi's opinion? He's not choshesh he's choshesh for the other guy?
Maybe. Maybe he is. So.
I hold like this, but I still think like the other guy might be right.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to have opinions.
But I saw somewhere recently that it was a debate between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai about something, and it was like the tzaddikim in Beit Hillel follow Beit Shammai, right, or something like that. Even the halacha k'Beit Hillel, it's a little bit like that. So, all right, we were at Yeshomrim. So Yeshomrim, Noam, pick us up here.
Yeshomrim de'ein matin reicha afilo b'diavad ela im ken hatanor patuach ketzat minatzad olamala b'makom shashen yotzeh. So there are those who say that we are not matir for reicha, even b'diavad, unless the tanor is open a little bit, either from the side or above the smoke to exit. Uvimkom hesed ein l'hachmir diavad. But in a case of loss, we don't need to be machmir b'diavad. Afilu satum legamre, even if the oven is totally closed up. V'im ha'isor davar charif v'chol sheken im ha'heter davar charif reita miltahi v'afilu b'diavad asor im shnehem migulim. And if the prohibited substance, the prohibited food is charif, and all the more so if the heter is charif, then reicha is a thing. And even b'diavad, it's forbidden if they are both uncovered.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment here. Right, we're going to see this. Harif food has this ability, and it makes sense, right? Spices, things that are meant to draw out flavor in things, right? That's their job in life, and so they are going to. We'll even see that something harif may be able to draw out, turn pigima into something tasty, right? The same thing, harifut can take stuff that's maybe not a thing and make it into a thing.
But which way does it go? Notice the kol.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So if it's the mutar thing is harif, that's gonna like draw out the Isser flavor.
Exactly. So it's kind of the opposite of what you think. You think, oh, when you burn an onion, it makes a strong smell, and that smell goes in. No, it's the other way around. When you're burning, let's say cinnamon,
yeah,
and it's gonna suck out from the treif meat flavor, and the cinnamon will become mustard now. Because it was harif, it pulled out stuff.
Yeah, it fits with
that's the concept.
It fits with the Mishnah in Trumot, right? Because there you're burning the harifut and it's mutar with the bread. You're burning I assume that cumin is harif, right? That sounds like it's a harif thing to me. So, but okay. No, keep going.
But if one of them is covered, then even even just with dough, it's permitted. I assume that's lechatchila.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I think, right? Yeah, I think so. Mutar is usually lechatchila language, right? So.
All right. Im afu otzalu isor veheter tachat machava.
No, I think.
You think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's complicated because he was contrasting with the het. He said it's asur b'diavad, and now he's saying it's mutar b'diavad.
Yeah.
Except that it's not clear what he means.
Yeah, the shach, by the way, I just saw afilu bebatzek be'alma. The shach in Yud says, no, is that right, Satz? Yeah. Vechatuv be'isur veheter mihu lechatchila tov leachmir. Right.
Right, because he's just contrasting the b'diavad. When he said before it's b'diavad asur, here's b'diavad mutar. But I think he's only talking again about strong things. And that's a weird case. Strong things, but covered but covered. So what? It's like we talked about covered being mutar, and we talked about strong things being asur. What about strong things that are covered? And he gets in this weird case.
Yeah.
This is only where one of them's covered. Seemingly
right.
Both covered l'chachila mutar.
Potentially, yeah. That sounds like at that point it's almost as if they're completely separate, right? There's no.
I'm not looking by the case if it's like isu charif, and it's a covered heter that's not charif. If it's covered with batzek, are you then not eating the batzek? Like, isn't that also heter that's not covered? The batzek.
Yeah.
Well, the charif is under the batzek, so it doesn't get out.
No. But it just says a hadmam, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so like, shouldn't that be either one?
Well,
so
then the other one is if the isser is covered with batzek, you can't eat it for sure because isser.
Yeah, the thing to remember is batzek is not shamen at the end of the day either, and so bread has things that are not fatty. Almost everyone seems to agree that reach is not such a problem in that case, right? Even Rav would agree that reach isn't a problem with unfatty things.
No, but he's saying that the spice, right.
Yeah,
spice
the same thing here.
It has to be the spicy thing that's covered, right? It can't be the unspicy.
Yeah, it has to be the spicy thing that's covered because otherwise, the other one's for sure asur. I mean, no, either one can be covered, but you're never going to eat the treif one. And if the other one's covered, it would also be mutar.
Right, but if it's covered with batzek, then anyway, whatever. Then the batzek is part of is also heter. Then you can't eat the batzek, right? Anyway.
But I think you can.
Never mind.
You can't eat the batzek, no.
Yeah, but I'll put an email. I have to go in 2 minutes, so I'll put an email follow-up about why I think, and we can argue about it out. All right, maybe I'll try and take us to the end here, and then maybe we can go back to this Ramada begin. It's up to Rav Nachum, unless I'm teaching next time. But so
We can both teach next time.
there we go. All right. Ima fu od salu isur v'heter tachat machavat achat megulim asur afilu b'diavad. All right. Now we're talking about, right, you have like a, I always think about it with ovens, with like those oven hoods that are over things that are, right over, 2 pots that are cooking. That's, and they're both uncovered. That's a problem, right? Even b'diavad. Right, and similar thing, if there's a cover right over both of them, it's like one cover, then bread and basar is also a problem, because now you have meaty bread, which we know is asur. It's asur le'achlo bechalav, you can't eat it with milk. So but aval bazeh achar zeh ein lachush. But if I put one in and then I finish cooking it, I take it out and then I put the next one in, that's okay, right? You don't have to worry about that kind of thing. Ela imken, what's the exception? Hizia machavat mishnehem de az asur afilu bazeh achar zeh imayu shnehem megulim de haviki kisui shel kedera. Right? If there is, shall we say, I don't know, steam, sweat, whatever you want to see, some liquid coming out from both of them from this covering, that's a problem, even one right after another, because this is essentially you're covering an Isser and Heter together, is essentially what's going on here, and that's problematic. So, and that's almost like cooking them together. Kidil el siman tzadi gimel, we have it. All right, and Yeshomrim dechoma. Yeah, go for it.
What is the case here? What is the case here? You confuse me with the cover, with the hood, with the oven, with the stovetop hood. Is that what we're talking about? Or we're talking about in an oven with a large? I thought we were talking about in an oven with a large lid that covers 2 pots.
I think it's an oven with a large lid is what we're talking about. So.
Now there's in an oven 2 pots with a large lid over both pots.
Yes, or some other top thing that's like right above both of them.
Right, and it's catching all the
steam,
smells and vapors.
Yeah, vapor. That's a good word. That's what I was looking for there. So, all right. And Yeshorim dechol makom damrin recha milta ve'oser b'diavad. Hainu davke deleka shishim mina heter neged ha'isur. Aval b'diika shishim mina heter afilu bechol mashe betanur mevatel ha'isur. This is, I think, important. This is where I kind of got the thing I said at the beginning, is like cooking an oven is like, everything is cooking together in some ways. Is that if there's 60-1 against the Isser, you have a bunch, and even if it's like a bunch of separate heterim that are in this one oven, and they add up to a 60-1 ratio against the Isser, that's okay.
Even though the thing smells like the Isser.
Exactly. So, I mean, and that you might think, well, each one of them has to be 60-1, right? And no, we actually see that all the forces are able to marshal together against this one thing. So, but Ulasorach, and he says, Ulasorach have said Yeshlin Hoken, right? But I actually have to go because I have another meeting. So maybe can I finish this up next time?
Yeah, you can. Next time you can continue, and I'll pick up wherever you stop.
Perfect. I will stop the recording. I can figure out how to do that. Thank you, everybody. So.